This meeting is being recorded.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Adoption Happy Hour brought to you by NAAP. We are the National Association of Adoptees and Parents, where it is our mission to elevate our diverse voices by promoting dialogue, understanding, and healing through education, awareness, and connections. I'm Marcie Keithley, your host for the evening, along with Beth Story, joining us in the Zoom room. Jennifer is out. She just had oral surgery this week, so she's going to be out for a little bit. So we're wishing her a speedy recovery. But we're looking forward to a good evening this evening. But before we introduce our guest and panel, we've got a few announcements to make. Okay, we want to remind everyone this is a public meeting with no guarantee that information or identity is confidential. Portions of this event are recorded and may be shared in our private happy hour group on Facebook and on our YouTube channel. So if you don't follow us already on Facebook, please join us over at Adoption Happy Hour group, where this recorded replay will be later on. A reminder to remain on mute, raise your hand or screen or the virtual hand to be recognized. You may post your questions or comments in chat. If you are experiencing a serious mental health event or suicidal thought, please contact a licensed professional or the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline by dialing 988. What we got next, Beth?
This is just a review of our regular programs. Happy Hour is the first and third Friday of each month. And Dr. Joyce hosts her reunion group normally on the third Tuesday of the month. It does vary sometimes. Amber's First Families group will be coming up on the second Thursday of June. And then Danielle Gaudette normally hosts Self-Love Essentials on the last Thursday, but she will be skipping May because she had a conflict, but that will be coming. You will want to follow NAAP on Eventbrite, and then you can keep up with all of our programming. And then we want to announce our newest event that just published this week. We will be hosting our second annual mini meetup. This year's theme will be Journeying Together Toward Healing, a day-and-a-half retreat type setting at Pokagon State Park here in Angola, Indiana. Jen has a lake home just across the lake in this picture that you are looking at. Anyone who went last year can tell you that it is an absolutely gorgeous, relaxing setting, and we had a wonderful time. So we are looking forward to doing that again. And we have Patricia Knight Meyer from My Adopted Life will be with us. She will be sharing a couple of times. And since our theme is on healing, we're going to have various people from our adoption family share their tips and their strategies that have helped them in their healing process. We're going to have 4 meals together. We're planning for a campfire. It's just going to be a really awesome time. So watch the chat tonight, and I will be dropping links in about that. This is not like a 200-person conference. We don't have that much room. So if you are interested, you're going to want to get your registration in right away. And that is it for me, Marcie.
Great. All right. Thank you. Yeah, we had a great time this past fall, and it was a huge success. And again, this is a different field. We wanted to have a different setting, unlike a conference or a summit, something more on a smaller scale, more intimate. And we just had a great time. And so we hope all of you can join us again this year. Okay. Are we ready? I would like to introduce our guest this evening. Jeanette, welcome, welcome.
Thank you.
We'll start with you. It's so good to see you again.
Thank you for
And for those of you that don't know Jeanette, she's joining us from LA. I'm assuming from your office.
Yes, this is my home office, actually. I had to shut down my office during COVID, unfortunately. So I'm still working remotely.
Okay, a little bit about Jeanette, too, before we start. For those of you that haven't met her, she is a foster adoptee from New York, was raised in New York State foster care system from ages 15 months until 7 years old. This is please put yourself on mute if you could. She founded Yoffe Therapy, Inc., a mental health center in Los Angeles, which provides services to family, children, teens, and adults connected by foster care and adoption. And I invited Jeanette to join us tonight because I couldn't think of a better guest to have on, and being that May is foster care awareness month.
Thank you for having me. Yeah. Am I to start now or?
I'll keep talking for a few minutes.
Oh,
I'll let
okay.
you
Yeah,
before that.
thanks
I'm
for
going to
having
introduce everybody. Yeah, you're welcome. I'm going to introduce everybody. We're going to do something a little different tonight. I've asked Jeanette to come on, and basically what we're going to do is have a panel. So we've asked some individuals to come on. We have Chris Thomason. Chris, where are you?
Right here.
Here you are. And we're going to have we got a surprise. You know, Chris is an adoptee who was raised in foster care. And his birth brother, Chris Chastain, is joining us. So we're going to start off in just a few seconds. And then, so Chris is the birth brother of Chris Thomason, and they're in reunion. And Chris Chastain is also a foster care father. He and his wife have fostered children. So we thought we could get his perspective as well. And then also joining us from Nashville is Brett Hamilton. Brett, you're on mute. You can say hello. And Brett is a non-adoptee, but he was raised in a household of how many siblings, Brett? Take yourself off mute. I can't remember. Was there 9? 9 siblings?
Yeah, a little higher, 11 total.
11 siblings.
Go live in 2 hours.
Okay.
I continue through, but
And his
they're not
his
able to, but they got confirmation.
Okay, that's fine.
and he,
Okay. They're gonna text
excuse me, somebody,
Beth,
Beth, can you see who needs to be put on mute?
Okay. Okay, perfect.
Okay. And anyway, his father was a psychologist, and he was raised in a home where it was like 150 foster care children came through.
Yeah, since when I was born, literally all the way through high school graduation.
And were any of those adopted?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So anyway, I thought it was interesting to get Brett's perspective of a non-adoptee raised in a home full of foster care children. So that's what we're going to be discussing tonight, and I'm going to let Jeanette lead it off.
Okay.
And share her story and go ahead.
Okay. And we're everyone's sharing stories, so I'm looking forward to hearing everyone's stories and how they all intercept with one another. Yes, I'm here in Los Angeles. I've been here for 22 years now, I think. Yes. I'm originally from New York, born and raised in New York City, raised in a foster home on Long Island in New York. And to explain what happened to me and my story was my mother was actually an immigrant from Argentina, and she came to New York to be a dancer. She had a work visa to be a dancer. She was a dancer in Argentina. She was part of a dance company. This is the early 70s. She wanted to be with all the artists in New York, and she did. She spent a lot of time with many different artists, and she's told me Jimi Hendrix, Andy Warhol. They all went to a place called Max's Kansas City. I don't know if anybody knows of that, the history in New York City, but it was a hub-nub for writers, poets, artists, singers, dancers. And she met my father, and they fell in love, and she became pregnant. And she was Roman Catholic, so she told my birth father, we need to get married. So they eloped at New York City Hall and then had me. And I did remain with them for 15 months. During that time, and I'm lucky to have this information, and it's been many years since age 17 when I really started being curious about what happened Number one, to my birth family. Secondly, to my foster family, because I had two families before I was adopted. And so I found out a lot of information most recently, actually, right before the pandemic. I went to the agency I was adopted from, Jewish Childcare in Manhattan, and I had a meeting with the director, and I said, I'm one of thousands of foster kids in New York. Can I get my records while I was in foster care? As far as I know, there's no closed records of your records for someone who's been in foster care. And he said, you have a right to your records. And I have 5 folders of paperwork of me being raised in the foster care system in New York. And took me a while to read all of this, right? Because it's new information. It's information that you're scared to read because you don't know what you're going to find. I've reread information. So I've been privy enough now at this point to have all this information, and it's taken years, okay? So going back, I learned that during this time, while I was alive with my birth mother and birth father, my mother became pregnant with my brother, and her mother was very ill in Argentina. Apparently, she also did some drugs, as far as we know, and the significant stress and the combination of all these things caused her to have some psychosis, and it was deemed unsafe for me to live with her. I'm not going to say anything more than that at this point, because this is private information, but it was deemed unsafe for me to live with her. And then I was placed in the New York State foster care system. And what's interesting was I met her. My mother's name is Celia, and I do have an organization called Celia Center, which I named after my first mother. You're welcome to join our support groups, our events. You go to celiacenter.org. And I had the privilege of meeting her over 17 years now. And her story, I remember when she said, she actually brought me to the Jewish Child Care Agency because she was informed by a doctor, this is where you can bring your child. But we don't know exactly what she was told, but she was not thinking properly and did not understand the child welfare system in America. She thought it was a public funded, oh, they take care of your child for a little while. You can drop them off here. She thought that was her understanding. So that clearly tells us her thinking and her processing during that time was not clear. And so having brought me to Jewish childcare, she says she remembers that day very vividly, because as they placed me in another room, the door closed, and this image just for me is just so striking. I had looked up at her and had this epiphany, am I ever going to see you again? It felt like a finality. For me, for her, she didn't know. But for me, she said, my face just went cold and I was in fear and reaching out to her. So it's just painful to read this information in my paperwork and have her share that story with me. And so I then was placed in the foster care system. I went to live with a Jewish family. I remember my mother was Roman Catholic. Apparently she was told that go to Jewish childcare. She wanted me raised or taken care of by Jewish people. And I ended up being adopted by a Jewish home. But I did spend 6.5 years in that one foster home because, and when I got my paperwork, there is a lot of back and forth information between the Argentinian consulate and the New York consulate, because we were expected after my brother was born. So after I was placed in foster care, 3 months later, my brother was born. He stayed with my birth family for the next 9 months. Then my mother had another, I don't know if it was an episode. I don't have her records, but then he was then placed in foster care in another family in the Bronx. Then at that time, I was raised in Long Island. I had some visits with my birth family, mainly my birth father, which is protocol when any child goes into the foster care system. It's about family reunification. It's not about adoption. It's about putting services in place for that family to get the mental health services, medical services, family support services that they need so they can be reunified with their children. So that's why there are court-ordered visits. So I did have visits, and to add, and we could sit here and talk for hours because I have many stories, but when I first came here to Los Angeles, I wrote a one-woman play called What's Your Name? Who's Your Daddy? And I wrote this because I was really trying to make sense of what happened to me and who am I? Because I did find my birth father when I was older, and it was not a pleasant reunion. So going back to my early life, I did have visits with my birth father, and I saw that in my paperwork, which is surprising to me because he will not have a relationship with me or my brother. And I did not know my brother growing up until I was 6 years old. And I had a social worker who came and visited me at my foster home every month, which is what they did. And they did not tell me anything, but my brother shows up with my social worker. And I remember standing at the top of the stairs in my foster home and looking down and seeing a child who looked just like me. And I almost fainted. And I remember standing there. I remember my legs, I couldn't stand. It was traumatizing to here I was being shown a reflection of myself for the first time. And no one prepared me for this moment. No one talked to me about this moment. And so these moments have really compelled me to do the work that I do today with children and teens and adults, helping them make sense of what happened to them during foster care. And I'm a huge advocate. I teach social workers here in LA County on best practices when giving information, how to help children process information before and prepare them for what's to come. Because as we know, many kids do not get reunified, and potentially they will either move to another foster placement, group home, or be adopted. So there's many changes that children need to be prepared for and life transitions. So when I saw my brother for the first time, I was told, you're going to go on a long plane ride with your brother and go live with family in Argentina. It's the first time I even heard the word Argentina. So here I was, 6 years old with all this information. And so all the paperwork talks about, they were trying to place us because they're what's called due diligence. They have to either find family to take care of that child and child welfare, do that due diligence before going on to the next process of terminating parental rights and placing a child in a permanent home to adoption. So after this process, they prepared us. We had passports made. I spent the whole day with my brother. I think I was shell shocked, to really tell you the truth. He was much smaller than me. I didn't know what to do with this. I never had a brother before. It was a whole new experience. And then it never happened. No one explained anything to me. And then I had visits with multiple families. I would go have overnights, sleepovers, and meet potential families, because then the next protocol was, well, she's not going to go live with her aunt and uncle in Argentina, because that fell through, because my aunt and uncle didn't feel that they could care for two children under the age of 7, all by themselves. They did not feel equipped. And so there's a lot of back and forth paperwork about everything was going really well until they became concerned and worried that they could not parent two children. So then the rug got pulled over, but I didn't from under us. I didn't know this information then. I learned it only 3 years ago. So with that, I never saw my brother again. The fourth house that I had a sleepover at, it felt like home. And the reason why they knew it was home was because as I left the house, my social worker brought me into the car to go back to my foster home. I said, can they buy me a bathrobe? That meant I felt a sense of safety, wanting to see them again. And I did. I had a longer sleepover with them and eventually was adopted by them. And this was a town over from where I lived in my foster home. So if you want to learn more to my story, because I can't tell everything, you can listen to my play. It's on Audible. I've recorded it. And it talks about the journey that I had from the child's point of view. And a lot of foster parents and adoptive parent groups are actually listening to it because it's helping them understand what happens for a child. Because I talk about what's happening inside my own mind and my body and what I'm experiencing in these moments. And it's very informative. So to cut to the chase, so I was adopted, 7.5 years old, lived with that family. We fostered 3 more children and adopted 2 of them. And 1 child was reunified with her mother. And I was 13 when that happened. That was another big awakening for me because I thought, oh, you can be reunified with your mother? So when my sister was reunified with her mother, I thought, well, where's my mother? And I waited because I thought, I didn't have anyone to talk to about this. There were no books, I didn't know any other kids like me. No one was explaining anything. So I'm thinking, oh, I'm next in line. And it didn't happen. And that's when I started acting out. I had suicidal ideation. And I almost ended my life. Thank God I didn't. And here I am, because that moment when I attempted, my parents put me in therapy. And therapy changed my life. It helped me understand what happened to me. And it is emotional. This is a lifelong process. And I often feel pulled in 2 directions. I'm adopted, and I'm also have this whole life of being in foster care. And what's striking is when I was adopted, my adoptive father said to me as an adult, he said, when you came to us, it was like you had a whole other life before us that we knew nothing about. But I carried it in my mind and my body. And I still carry it, as you see. We're always processing. We're always healing. We're always revisiting. We're always recycling. We're always rethinking. And So I feel very blessed to do the work that I do today with kids. And I've written 2 books for kids. What is adoption? And, I'm sorry, what is foster care? And what is adoption? And they're all both in Spanish also. So I'm just going to read this and then I'm going to stop for now so we can hear everyone else's stories. So on the back of the book, I go, and I explain the whole process of foster care. So remember, all of you amazing foster youth, you are strong enough, you are loved enough, you are valuable enough, and you matter so much. Entering foster care is an act of courage. Just by being here, you have been awarded the badge of courage. This experience will make you stronger and bring you more love in your life and in your heart. You will grow from this experience in amazing ways. Always take pride in who you are and where you come from, no matter what. Love, me. So, I'm sure many people have many questions. To finish, I will say that my birth father was traumatized. My mother ended up becoming hospitalized, and she was deported back to Argentina and lived in a government-run women's institution for the next 40 years of her life. And my birth father still lives in the same apartment in New York City that I lived at for the first 15 months of my life. He has had no more children, he's not remarried, and I met him in 2018, uninvitedly, let me just say that. And I did it for me because we're not a secret. You can't run, I believe, this is my opinion. I needed to do it for me. I needed him to see that you may not value me, but I value you. And I'm important. And he has healing that I don't think he will ever do at his age. You know, a lot of us come from this time period, baby scoop era, 70s, where parents were told, forget this ever happened. And that's what my birth father was told. So it's very sad. And at the same time, just every year, you just never know how things may change. Doing this healing work for others helps me stay compassionate. And when there are birth parents that want to reunify and have relationships with their children, it fills that part of myself that I'm helping the next generation not suffer the way we did and have these losses. So I think that's all I'm going to say about my story for today. Thank you for listening and allowing the space.
Thank you, Jeanette. Thanks. Okay, Chris Thomason, I'm going to let you share a little bit of your story and then go ahead and introduce your birth brother next.
Hi, my name's Chris. Can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
I was in foster care from birth until I was 4 years old. Just real briefly, my birth mother became pregnant the last 6 months of college. She called home. Her father picked up the phone and she told her father that she was dropping out of college, and he asked, why would you do that? And she said, well, I'm getting married. And he said, no, you're not. You're going to finish school, because she was close to finishing school. She had 2 older brothers who helped run the family farm, and they obviously didn't have that opportunity. And, you know, back in the late 50s, early 60s, it was really, especially in that part of the country, in the Midwest, it was really unheard of for a woman to get to go to college. So this was a huge opportunity for her. Anyway, long story short, the next day, her dad and one of her older brothers came to the college and took her home. And within a day or a couple of days, she was on a train to Los Angeles. And they really drilled it into her that, do not come home with the baby. If you're going to come home, do not come home with the baby, or don't come home. And I really think that she just, to this day, I think she just really feels that she devastated her family to the point they never spoke to her about it, and they took her secret to their grave. And I think in that sense, she never, ever has felt, even to this day, that she was ever forgiven by her parents. Anyway, I was in foster care between birth and 4. At 4, I got adopted by the Thomasons. It was a young couple. They were 30 years old. It was a second marriage for both of those. And the adopted father had a daughter from a previous marriage, and they were fostering a boy, John, who was a year older than I was. And then there was me, and then they adopted a younger girl, my adopted sister, Julie. So I was kind of 2 of 3, however you want to look at it. 10 months after they adopted me, the father died suddenly. The mother was 30, widowed with all of these kids. The county came up the next day, took Lori, the oldest one, and John, the foster child, and took them away. And 2 weeks later, the adopted mother, took me and the younger sister, and she took us down to a motel by her mom's house down in South Central Los Angeles, put us down for a nap, called the social worker, said, I can't do this. I'm widowed. I don't have a job. I just can't do this. She was also taking care of her mother. And the social worker came, I guess, and got us. We ended up with another foster family named the Dunns, who had 3 biological children. They fostered us for about a year. Then around, I guess it would have been about 5-ish or 5.5, 6. The brother of the first adopted father, he and his wife were married. They had 5 biological kids. He was a dentist. He took the younger sibling and me, and we lived with them for about 3.5 years or so. Really nice family. And one of the really few times I just really felt safe and secure and loved, and it was happy. And then one Sunday afternoon, I came home from camp. I was about 10.5. And I was eating a bowl of cereal. I was so hungry from being at camp all weekend with all that dried food. And somebody came into the kitchen and told me that Tom, my uncle, who would have been my adopted uncle, had been killed in a plane crash with his oldest son. And I immediately became sick to my stomach, because I knew what that meant. And I knew that I was going to go back into the system. And the next, about maybe 3 days later, a caseworker came and we were removed again. My younger sister, I truly don't know where she went. I was taken to a family, the Spear family, who had 2 biological sons. Again, wonderful family, just a wonderful family. And they treated me like a son for those 8 months I lived there. They were just the nicest people. And just a few years ago, I held the wife, her name is Phyllis. I held her hand as she passed away in Laguna Niguel. And to that day, she still called me her 3rd son. She only had me for that less than a year, but just wonderful people. We then, right around this time, it had been almost 10 years by this time since we had been removed from the first adopted family. That adopted mother had remarried. And this would have been late, like 69, 70. And at that point, she tried to get us back, which she did. And the guy that she had married was very violent. We were scared to death most of the time. It was a nightmare. We were there about 5 years. And by the time I was 15 years old, I was just out of there. I ran away a lot, during that time. By the time I was 16, I had a girlfriend, and her family knew what was going on. And they told her, you just tell Chris he can stay here and sleep on our living room floor, which I did. So from about 9th grade until I graduated high school, I just slept on my girlfriend's family floor, and the grandma slept on the sofa. But it just worked. And their daughter, I ended up marrying her. I knew if I married her, because I loved her parents, still do. Sadly, her mom passed away last Saturday. But I just loved her parents. And I knew that if I married her, I would have a mom and a dad. And that's really what I wanted so bad. She had lots of aunts and uncles and cousins, and it was just this huge Irish Catholic family. It was great. So anyway, but I remember when I graduated from high school, they marched everybody off the field that afternoon onto buses to go to Disneyland for grad night. Not me. I had rented an apartment and collected my clothes and moved into an apartment in Pasadena. And, that's my story. But I want to introduce everybody to my birth brother, Chris. Yes, I have a biological brother named Chris. And when I found my birth mother 23 years ago, her and I started secret phone calls for about 4.5 years. And the first thing she told me was that she never knew if she had given away her boy or a girl. So there was no way she could have possibly known to name one of her sons Chris. So I can only imagine what she thought or was feeling the day that I found her and called her to identify myself. And I said, hi, my name's Chris. She realized, holy crap, I have 2 sons named Chris. So this is my birth brother, Chris. And when I found my birth mom and I started learning about this brother, he was already a foster parent. Him and his wife, Krista, were foster parents. And so, looking at the math here, this guy has fostered for over 30 years, Chris. This guy has the biggest heart. It will start to make me cry if I talk about him. I am the most blessed man in the world to have a brother like this guy. Anyway, just really briefly, weeks after, I think maybe within about a month after he had found out that our mother had given away his oldest brother, him and his wife won the Foster Parents of the Year award and were put on a cruise years ago. And they're just this amazing couple. And I think it was Cleveland, a caseworker in Cleveland called him and said, hey, we have this young pregnant girl who's in the hospital, and she thinks she had 2 little girls who were like maybe around 5, and she was having another baby, and she was in college, and she just could not do it. And Chris jumped at the chance and drove to Cleveland. I'm probably getting parts of the story wrong, but he met with the caseworker, and Chris had just found out that his own mother had been coerced into giving away his brother. And when he met with the caseworker, he said, well, I want to go up and talk to this young mother who's just given birth. And the caseworker said, oh, no, we don't do that. We don't do that. And Chris said, I do it. And he went up to her room and met with her and told her who he was and that they would always stay in touch. And I mean, this is the kind of guy this guy is. So anyway, this is my birth brother, Chris. That's my story.
Hi, Chris. Welcome.
Yes, good story. Thank you. Hi.
Well, yeah, so share just a little bit about yourself, if you would, please.
Well, to add to that, I'm blessed to know my brother Chris, and there's a lot more to the story he hasn't shared about how he found his birth mom, our mom, and found us. And so if he wouldn't have done that, we would never even know he existed. So I'm very grateful that he went through, very grateful he did what he did to find us, but he went through a lot to do it. So we are fortunate and lucky to know him. And I tell people he's the kind of guy that would give the only shirt he has off his back for a complete stranger. It's just, in spite of all the crap and all the hardship he went through, he's an amazing guy. So I'm thankful for that. I don't say about us. We fostered a couple dozen kids. We've adopted 6. 5 of them from foster care. One's a private adoption. That one from the hospital that he was talking about. And then we, one of them is a kinship. We have a 9-year-old, our youngest adoptee, and our oldest is like 26. So we have 2 birth daughters. One's 14 and the other one is just turned 22 2 days ago. So
how old were you when you met Chris?
I believe I was right around 40 and I'm 53 now. So,
And I have to tell you, I went back to the Midwest to our mom's house and met my birth family, and it was phenomenal. It was kind of an out of body experience. And the last one to come, because Chris is the only brother that lives out of state, out of Illinois. And so he came the next morning, and I kept waiting. Jeanette might be able to relate to some of this, but I kept waiting for the shoe to drop. Someone's got to be pissed off at me. Someone's got to be angry at me that, I rocked the egg cart or whatever. And Chris, finally this big Partridge Family van with all these kids, and everybody starts screaming, Chris and Chris are here, and all these kids run in. I think at the time he was fostering 9 kids. I think you had 9. I'm pretty sure about that. And they all just came running in the house, Grandma, and it was early in the morning, and I was in the kitchen, and he walked in, and he had a very serious look on his face. And I thought, okay, this is going to be the one. This is going to be the brother who's pissed off and ticked off, and you've ruined our family and all this kind of thing. And so, I stood up and I kind of clenched my fist because I thought, I may have to deck him, and he walked up to me. He walked up to me, and I put my hand out to shake his hand. And he goes to hug me, and he says to me, I'm your brother, Chris, and thank you for never giving up surfing for us. Blessed am I. I mean, this is this guy. Great guy. Great guy. So you don't think I remember this stuff?
Well, thanks, Chris, for introducing us to Chris, and we're glad to have him this evening. So
the funny thing about that meeting there is when right before we walked in the house, I just remember thinking, this is weird. I don't know how this is going to go or what this feels like to meet somebody you're related to that you didn't even know existed. And so I was a little bit nervous, and I walked in the house and I saw him for the first time in my life. And I was like, well, he's my mother's son because he looks more like her than I do. So he's the real deal. But so I'm glad he did what he did to find us. It's been great.
Yeah, and Chris and my nieces Madeline and Sarah were just out here 4 months ago. They came out and visited and stayed with me here in Los Angeles on Venice Beach in January, I think it was. Yeah, he was just out here. So such a gift, such a gift, such a gift. I'm so blessed.
okay, thank you both for sharing. Okay, and then last we wanted to talk to Brett Hamilton, and Brett is not an adoptee. Hey, Brett, where are you? There you are.
Hello.
Good to see you. And
Yeah.
I met Brett a couple of months ago and shared my story with him and found out that he was raised in a home with 11 siblings. And his father was a psychologist, and yep, there's the gang there. That's a good picture. Yeah. And they took in over 150 children, fostered 150 children. And I just thought that was so interesting and wanted to get his perspective on what it was like growing up in a large family with all these foster care children and what that was like.
All right, you guys see the picture, hopefully, of the mishmash of people, colors, sizes and all that, correct?
Yes.
Okay. The key, if I may, in terms of sharing what my experiences was, it was, I had different brothers growing up all the way. This is, later in years, but it was always a point where I recognized or kind of understood that it's not about the kids who were the issue. It's not the child who was the problem. Some kids, kind of like to rebel or maybe, lash out. But it was a point where it was the parents who had, the issue, not the child. And so I never, as I was a young guy, meeting and, different, every 6 months someone new came in. And the reason we didn't adopt because we already had 11. So it was hard to add to that mix. Okay. But it was a point of us accepting, number one, that we can share our food, our family, our ways with those. And because we have so many kids, we needed even numbers on sports teams. So it worked out well too, where we were, it was 6 on 6, 8 on 8. So that worked out pretty good. Right. And it wasn't about me or my family. The only thing we made sure was in terms of, introducing them was that they respected, our mother, number one. And the only thing that really mattered was they respect her because, she was cooking for all of us. If you can imagine, the size of pots that she used. Everybody had chores. Everybody had responsibilities. It was an equal playing field no matter what. It wasn't, and my mom always asked, later in life, she asked, I wouldn't have been able to do it. I didn't agree to do it because it wasn't something we really wanted to do or kind of looked to do. It was a request from those in the area we grew up in. They asked for them to have sent the kids to us so they could be away from the parent and be in an environment where they could actually have brothers, be treated like young men and, be held accountable, which they weren't in some aspects. So kind of hearing all the stories is amazing and it's phenomenal. To hear the endurance and the age that a lot of people had to go through this. I mean, I remember since I was a tot, I had, foster brothers and sisters. So it wasn't abnormal to me. It wasn't, something strange as I kept going along. I realized that, they wanted to fit in, they wanted to be, responsible, respected. And it wasn't a point of us doing anything differently. They did, their grades weren't up, they didn't play sports. They had to do their chores before they had breakfast. Everybody had to do it. So it was a very valuable lesson. And the last point, the most important point was, we had a foster brother, or I had a brother who was a Down syndrome. Okay. And my brother was, as a Down syndrome, kept things in terms of reality check in point. So think about this. Think about being a foster child, coming into this home with all these kids, and there was bunk beds, it was a dormitory that we built. And then meeting one, who's a Down syndrome. And it was just like one of those things where a lot of people look at it, and 150, as was stated, is about the accuracy of the amount of foster children from beginning to end. From when I graduated, I was the last, so I graduated, and then we sold the property and all that. So that is where my mom still gets letters from foster family. We have them all over the country. We have them on all races, and genders. We even had female, foster girls in the house, at some certain point. And I'm serious where, in this day and age, it may not be acceptable. I don't know, but at that stage, it was a matter of just, hey, if they needed to be with us, they were going to be with us, period. No questions asked. So really, we never turned away. That I know. And as you saw, everybody was older, as you saw that picture, everybody was teenagers. And it's just an amazing, kind of look back and kind of being awoken by the fact that it is adoption month. It's interesting because my mom asked one particular brother to be adopted, and he declined. And he said no, and he just didn't. He was happy with what the relationship he had with with us and her and so on. So it was a point where my mom would have that choice more so than any of us. But many went off to college. many went off to different and some went, the opposite direction, and they still contact my mom about it regardless. So it's really, like I said, it's a journey, but it was, like I said, it was acceptance and realizing that you cannot judge what somebody's been through by when you walk in. You don't judge somebody, when you first meet them in terms of, you know what they are about, what they've been through. It's very unfair and it's very superficial. And, this is back, in the 70s, 80s, obviously. So it wasn't like there was internet to distract, and entertain. So it was a lot of, as she mentioned, my father was a professor of psychology. So he, brought a lot of, in the sense of us thinking, and honestly saying, hey, whatever you say, you can't take words back. You got to play fair. You got to, keep honesty there. It was just where he really instilled that, the truth will be the safer bet, and it always is. So, and foster kids, they tend to they say what people want to hear. They tell people what they want to hear. I'll say it that way, to kind of keep going and keep things smooth and not ripple the waves. So I understand that in a lot of aspects, but in our household, it was just, the truth would always surface later in. So it was best to tell it up front. And, that's kind of, you saw that picture, that was our, our pit area, and there was, if you guys counted the rows of kids and such, there's 4 on top, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, there's almost 16 kids right there. So trust me, the property held, had it, we had horses, we grew up on a farm type of thing. So, it was where the, it was we were known as being, as, the boys, literally. I said, it was just interesting to kind of have me recollect with you guys. And I appreciate you letting me share a bit about what it is that we, had to offer to others. And, it's just interesting that, you never know what if someone has been through, but yeah, we felt, my mom was really proud of us, as her kids, that we accepted it and we, worked with them and all that or whatever. We treat them as brothers, whether good, bad, or indifferent, whether they were 6 months or a month. So yeah, thank you. You're welcome. And thanks for give me this platform. I haven't really talked about it for quite a while. So I know I fumbled through, but showing the picture kind of gives you the idea, right?
Thanks, Brett. We really appreciate you coming on. I thought his story was interesting when we met, and I told him about our organization, some of the work we did. I just thought that this would be a really nice fit for us this evening. So thanks for coming on.
You're welcome.
So I'm going to go back to Jeanette. And Jeanette, let's kind of tie this up and take some questions too about all the different ways that foster care did impact different lives and at various stages. You had one experience, Chris had another. Brett obviously not being adopted, but he had a totally different perspective as well.
Yeah, I mean, no two stories are the same. even for adoptees, everyone's story is different. And really, I think it's your perception of it, right? It's what happened to you, but how do you perceive what happened to you? And what are you telling yourself about what happened to you? And that's where therapy comes in, and consolidating a new story, but a story that, for me, there was a new dawn when I said, wow, because I was always focused on the losses, so many losses. But then the day I woke up and I saw it differently, I said, and look at all the love. Look at all the love and attention I did receive over the years. And there's no perfect parents, right? Parents make mistakes. I'm a parent myself. We're not perfect. So it's how you perceive it. And there's love and loss in foster care, as is adoption. We wouldn't want this for any child. I even spoke to some foster youth alumni who want to eliminate foster care, right? So it's not even an option, but we don't have enough kinship families or relatives, extended family members, who are able to take in children whose parents cannot parent them. But there are new organizations. One of them is called Connect Our Kids, which is a online portal that social workers and agencies can use, which is another way for them to do the due diligence and find extended family members to raise that child, to eliminate going into foster care and being adopted by another family, which I love. And you can learn more by going to their website. And they've just launched within the last year. So this is something new and innovative that we're doing in child welfare, so that children do remain with family members. My aunt, my birth father's sister, did not even know about me and my brother. When I found her and had reunion with her only 5 years ago, she said, if I knew about you, I would have, and she could say that now, but she would have taken us in. So, there's a lot of new changes happening in child welfare. We're understanding more by hearing more stories like ours today. What is necessary, right? Siblings, keeping siblings together. I wasn't raised with my sibling. Neither was Chris. We need each other. We need to know our siblings. And it is best practice for siblings, if they're in two separate homes, to have a relationship. And I do a lot of that work too. Always telling families I work with, if they have siblings, make friends with their parents and get them together so they get to grow up together. It will help them, because when we meet as adults, we grow up together as adults. It's like we have to go back. And I actually went back when I had reunion with my brother. We went on a swing set at a playground because we never got to do that together as kids. So anything else? Anyone have any questions, thoughts?
Yeah, what we'd like to do at this point is go ahead and stop the recording for this portion of the program and open it up to questions from attendees. So let's go ahead and do